Hello, this is milestoneplay, and we are going to be doing a short walkthrough of how to make a character for some of my simplified 7th edition Call of Cthulhu games. Before we get into the character generation, for those of you who haven't played Call of Cthulhu before, it might be good to walk through some of the basic mechanics of how the game works, because it's different than your typical heroic Dungeons and Dragons type game. First of all, this is a skill-based game, as opposed to choosing a class like fighter or paladin or anything like that. Pretty much all characters have access to every single skill in the game, and what determines what you can do is simply where you put your points. So this is a character sheet that I have quickly made up for somebody who is a doctor of medicine. A lot of these numbers are a lot bigger than you would expect in something like Dungeons and Dragons, and that's because instead of rolling a d20 and adding a bonus to it trying to hit an unknown number, you know the numbers you're trying to hit. For instance, if I wanted to do a strength roll, I have a 50. That is a 50% chance of success. Ooh, we got a hard success. I'll explain that in a moment. But whatever your score is, you are trying to roll that number or lower. As your stats go up, whether it's your abilities or your skills, those numbers start off sometimes very low, 5, 1, things like that, and it can eventually get up into 80, 90, even over 100. You're looking for a lower number than what your score is. For most rolls, they're going to be a regular roll. So let's go ahead and pop out an appearance roll. We got a 64 on the roll with percentage dice, and that is a failure to meet our 50. Now, we do have these little numbers next to all of our big stats. Those are for hard and extreme rolls. A hard roll is when you are attempting to roll half of your value. Because you know what you're trying to roll for, sometimes things in a situation might be pretty difficult to do. So instead of changing what number you are directly trying to roll, the keeper, the person running the game, may just ask you to make a hard roll, and depending how good your character is at something, determines how difficult that hard roll is to be. If you have an 80 in a skill, so for instance, the doctor has an 80 in education, it might be just as easy for him to roll a hard roll as it is for some characters to roll a regular roll. From there, we go to extreme, and an extreme roll is 1/5 the value of your stat. So in this case, the education 80 gets reduced all the way down to a 16 for an extreme roll. Depending which of these roll options you have selected on Roll20, it does that form of roll. So you'll see that we got an extreme success because we beat 11 versus the 16 value. If you go ahead and click on the verbose option on the roll options, as opposed to comparing it to whatever partial value you're looking for, let's do a power roll right there. We failed a regular roll looking for a 50. We got a 59, but it will also show you underneath those values your regular, hard, and extreme, in case you don't want to be clicking back and forth on regular, hard, extreme, all those things. Clicking on verbose will make it easier for you to see what you rolled in comparison to all of the other values. From here, you will also see that in Call of Cthulhu, you have relatively little hit points. In this case, the Doctor of Medicine has 10 hit points. Throughout Call of Cthulhu's games, your hit points really don't go up. It is a very deadly game where whether or not your character's been being played for a single session or 2 years, somebody with a switchblade can still stab you in the lung and take you out pretty quickly. As your stats go up, you might just get better at dodging, at fighting, and preventing yourself from taking those wounds, but wounds themselves continue to be pretty dangerous when they happen. If we look over at our conditions, we have a little major wound box that we can click and keep highlighted, and then we can unclick. Next to the major wound, there is a value. This is going to be half of your hit points. If any single damage you take is of equaling that number, in this case 5 or more points of damage from a single instance, that is considered a major wound and other ramifications come with it. Another type of hit point that you have in Call of Cthulhu is sanity. Sanity is what prevents you from being insane. You are going to start with a higher amount of sanity. However, you don't have to reach 0 to go insane. There are different levels of insanity. There is temporary, indefinite, and permanent, I believe. So for a temporary insanity, during a single adventure, if you take more, in this case 10 points of sanity damage, you are going to go into a small temporary bout of sanity. Now, this will eventually go away, but it does show that you can only take so much mental strain before it starts to wear on you. I think that's pretty much everything to initially cover. Let's go ahead and now get into creating a character in Roll20. There are many ways to create characters, plenty of ways to do it, pen and paper, following the rule books, following the quick play guides. I'm just going to show you the easiest way to make it within Roll20 without having to have bought any of the materials for the online resources. So let's go ahead and drop out of our doctor and pull up our example character. In pulling up our example character, you are going to want to pull on over to the character sheet, and you could edit the sheet directly if you wanted to do this by the book and just use the Roll20's mechanism, or you can go ahead and click on the charactermancer. So within the charactermancer, this is just the welcome screen, and you can move on to the next. And we are going to start by creating our initial statistics for basically our ability scores. You can roll all of them with a simple click right here. Many of these numbers are generated by 3d6 and then just multiplying that total by 5. Some of the stats, for instance, luck, is actually 2d6 plus 6 to ensure that you're getting a higher value. You could also do a point buy method where you simply have 325 points to add on to all of your stats that start at 15 to make sure that you aren't starting too low. And then there's the quick fire method, which is also what is used within the quick play start guide that is available for free on the Chaosium website. And in this case, you would assign these different values and just one per column. We're going to go over to the standard and just roll for a bit of fun. Strength is similar to things like Dungeons and Dragons, where you have just your brute strength, how much you can lift. Constitution has to do with health and hit points and things like that. Dexterity is nimbleness, your ability to be quick on your feet. Power is kind of short for willpower, and that gets a bit more into magic, which most of my simplified Call of Cthulhu games won't get into, but in case, that is what this stat is for. Appearance is kind of charisma, but it's purely what you look like, how good you look, how attractive you are. Education is more of your level of, I don't want to say education, but that's what it is. It's how much general knowledge you have in comparison to intelligence. Intelligence is your own capability of problem solving as opposed to what you know. Size is your physical size, where in other games you can kind of be whatever size you want to be, whether you're 5 foot or 6 foot, 6.5, as long as you're within a general category. In Call of Cthulhu, this is actually something that is used for some of your other stats, your secondary characteristics that will come in later. So this helps determine how tall you are, how broad your shoulders are, and it does have the same swing from 15 up to 99. So with a 55, we're an average sized person. And then luck. Luck is how lucky you are. Sometimes the keeper may ask for a luck roll, whether you are seeing if you can quickly find a flashlight or if you can hail a cab at night. A luck roll will determine if that's even possible. So having these things done, we can continue on, and uh, you can either choose your own age or you can roll for it. So we went ahead and rolled a 64, and the older you get, your primary characteristics are going to change. In this case, based off of being 64, we actually get quite a few improvement rolls for our education. Now, I made a big point earlier of talking about how within Call of Cthulhu you want to roll below your stat because as your ability gets higher and higher, that percentage of rolling beneath allows for those 70% to roll underneath. For an improvement roll, the better you are in a stat, the harder it is to improve it. You want to fail the roll. It's much easier for somebody with an education of 20 to get more educated than it is for somebody with an education of 80 to get more educated. But based off of us having an age of 64, we have quite a few chances to improve our education, and you can just click on these little boxes and it will automatically roll. For this improvement roll, we succeeded in getting over our value, and it rolled a die, a d10, to determine how much our education went up. So in this case, we're going to just continue on through, and we improved another 6, 2 failures, so half of our improvement rolls on our education went up. Not everything is good though. An older character does get some deductions. In this case, we have to reduce our strength, constitution, and dexterity by a total of 20 points. Let's go ahead and just throw in 10 into strength and then 2 5s into constitution and dexterity as our body is degrading. And then equally so, our appearance does go down by a set number as you get older. Earlier I mentioned secondary characteristics based off of our primary stats, and here are some of them. Our damage bonus, anytime you would be doing damage during fighting, for instance, punching, kicking, attacking with a club, you have a base value of damage, and then you also get a bonus. In this case, we get a bonus 1d4, and this is primarily based off of our strength. Our movement rate down below is a 6. This is a bit slow. A 7, 8 is a bit better. 9 is a pretty fast character. And our movement rate is going to be based on things like our strength and dexterity in comparison to our size. So just because you are a very big person doesn't mean you can't be fast, but you are more likely to be slow if you have a very high size because your strength and dexterity may not be high enough. From there, our hit points and our sanity are going to be based off of our primary statistics using things like our intelligence, our willpower, our strength and constitution to determine these through a small algorithm as well as comparing to a chart, similar to magic points. Magic points, once again, lining up with willpower, not as likely that I will be using them within our smaller simplified games, but who knows, we might reach one of those points. From there, we can move on to occupation. Now, if you own a bunch of Call of Cthulhu books in Roll20, there will be options here. I do not, so you're going to have to do a custom character for your occupation. So you go ahead and just click on custom, and let's go ahead and pull on over to our quick play guide for Call of Cthulhu. Once again, this is available for free on the Chaosium website. And here are some example occupations. Earlier, I went ahead and used the Doctor of Medicine. In this case, let's go ahead and make a police detective. With a police detective, they give you a small list of different skills that the police detective will be trained in. You get to choose between acting as an art and craft or disguise, as well as firearms, law, listen, one interpersonal skill among the list of charm, fast talk, intimidate, or persuade, psychology, which in this game, psychology is also used for detecting if somebody is lying to you. So, very good for a police detective to have, spot hidden, and then any one other skill to round out their skill set. So in order to do this, any occupation you have is going to get those 8 that they suggest. Sometimes there's wiggle room. It really doesn't matter what your 8 skills are. So if you wanted to make your own custom occupation, the only main thing you need to know is you have 8 skills and then a credit rating. Within the full game of Call of Cthulhu, every occupation will come with a suggested minimum and maximum for their credit rating score. So if you do want to have a listed minimum or maximum, you can put those here. Something like a lawyer would have a moderate minimum, maybe in the 30s or 40s, maxing out towards 80, 90, 100, where somebody like a hobo would be between 0 and 40, perhaps. You don't have to put anything in here, but that is what this space is for. So I did list 8 skills that we would have. So after adding in these 8 skills for your occupation, you can go one by one and simply add them to what your listed 8 skills are going to be. So let's go ahead and do disguise. Let's do firearms. Firearms is going to be at the bottom with a specialization next to it. And the reason for that is there are different categories of firearms. So let's go ahead and just throw out pistol. From firearms, we have law and listen. As we're getting this, library use was between our law and listen. And library use is something that you may not think of as a heroic ability in something like D&D, but can be very useful for finding information for the arcane. One interpersonal skill. With that, let's go ahead and do charm. He's a rather charming police detective that people just kind of like and are willing to talk to. Psychology and spot hidden are some of the next that we need. And then we get one free skill to round out his skill set. And let's go ahead and do first aid. He's had quite a few people get hurt on the job, and he wants to make sure he can take care of them in the moment. After choosing your 8 skills that you need for your occupation, we can move on to our skills tab. Now, what you saw on the Doctor of Medicine, all those values were the total value. All skills start with some base value, some of them very low. Accounting, anthropology, appraise, archaeology, all are very low at either a 1% success rate for an untrained person, 5%. Some of the others, like charm and climb, aren't nearly as bad as a base value. Some of the base values, for instance, let's go ahead and go down to our languages. There's a couple subcategories down here for the things that are specializations. Everyone starts with their own language, and this is, I believe, going to be a base value of half your education. And then anything you add in from there just goes based in addition to that value. Down here, for instance, we have sciences. You can add skills like biology, pharmacy, zoology, botany. But for now, we have our occupation points. This is base 200 for a custom character. For full-on Call of Cthulhu, the occupation points you have to spend are actually going to be based off of your characteristics in comparison to what your occupation is. But 200 is a good, fair value for anybody to use. And in this case, I'm going to take within our occupation line of our different skill additions, and let's go ahead and just add in about 20 points to each of them to round out our character. Call of Cthulhu does have the ability to become very one-trick pony-ish, where you can have a lot of your skill points put into only a few stats. I don't recommend you do that, because if those situations don't come up, you will find that you can't really do anything. And we have 40 points left to spend, so let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and put those into charm. A couple more in charm, and we will also put a couple more into his credit rating. He's not super wealthy, but he's not a pauper by any means. From here, we've already done all of our occupation skills. you also get personal skills. So just because he is a detective, a police detective, doesn't mean he can't do other things in life. He doesn't have downtime activities or hobbies or things like that. So maybe out of our 120 points to spend, he is a little bit of a street racer. He enjoys driving, and it does help him a bit on the job. He Let's make him a bit athletic. Let's throw a couple points over into jump, and let's go on down to swim and give him some points there. That way he's a bit better in chasing down bad guys. And let's go ahead and let's put some more into psychology. Okay. So we have allocated all of our occupation points and our personal points and have got a new totals going down for what all of our different skills are. You are going to want to make sure that you are not forgetting anything down here. Brawl is going to be the base fighting skill you use, whether you are punching, kicking, not throwing pottery. Throwing pottery goes under throw. But things like switchblades or baseball bats would also go under brawl. You can add other fighting skills, but if you do so, they would be something similar to sword fighting or axe or chainsaw, where it's a greatly different technique, and knowing how to use those types of weapons are much more useful in combat if those opportunities come up. But we have all of our occupation and personal skills done. From here, we go into backstory. Within a longer campaign, backstory can have major influences, especially in getting back things like sanity. But for a one shot, these are more going to be a bit more for flavor. I welcome you to fill them in, but it may not have as much of an impact on the game as anything else. From there, we have all of our character info to review, and once we finish up, we are going to be back at a character sheet very similar to what we started with our doctor. A couple of things I do want to make note of as you go down is if we go over to settings, we want to make sure that in the controls we have our HP edit toggle on, the sanity toggle, and the luck toggle. These are going to allow these values to be changed. Hit points in case you take damage, sanity in case you take sanity damage, and then luck. Luck is something that can be rolled against, but there's the optional rule that I like to play with where you can actually spend your luck to alter your die roll. So for instance, if we needed to make an appearance roll, and luck isn't going to help us in this case with a 99. Let's try that again. Okay, this is easier to work with for the example. We got a 65 versus a 60 on this intelligence roll. If we wanted to, we could actually spend 5 points of luck and treat that as having rolled a 60. And you are literally spending your luck, making it so you have worse and worse luck, but you are using it to do certain things. From there, I think that is the bulk of setting up a character. A brief talk through of how Call of Cthulhu works for those who don't know, as well as setting up a custom character. I will have more example characters that you might be able to choose from when starting into a game. But for now, I wanted to make sure that you had the ability to make your own personal character, whether you wanted to play a hobo, a doctor, a electrical engineer, maybe a construction worker. Many options are open, and I can't wait to see what you bring to the table. Thanks.